Um, we're on. Oh, Kutfach David. Nobody's going to be able to hear you, see you. They're just going to hear you.
They'll have to believe I'm here.
My brother, you remember my brother David? So he's here for Shabbos. So he came to join us for some Bava Basra. Am I in the right place? Yeah, we're on the bottom of Yud Amid Beis. Ifra Hormuz, Emed Shva Malka. Ifra Hormuz, the mother of Shva Malka, she was a Gaita, the mother of a Gaish king. Shadra Abba Meya Dinri L'Kamei Ravami. She gave 400 dinrim to give to tzedakah to Ravami. But like Ravami did not want to accept it. Shadminu Kamei Rava, and she gave it to Rava, but Kablinu, he accepted. Mishum Shalom Malchus. Rava thought it was not wise to not accept the tzedakah from Ifra Hormuz. Shamar Rabami heard that Rava accepted what he had rejected, Ikbid, and he was makbid. Amalesle biyavish katsira tishabarna nashim boys meiris oisa. That biyavish katsira tishabarna is when the goyim are dried out, then they'll easily be dispersed. They'll and the biyavish katsira and the taisha to mean when they are not able to give tzedakah. If you remember, we had by Daniel gave Nebuchadnezzar the eitzah to give tzedakah to get out of his einish. So this is the opposite of that or that if they don't give tzedakah, then that will dry up their schusim and the nashim boys from iris, and then even a woman can come in and disperse them and get rid of them. So Ravami said, why are you giving them the goyim the schusim of tzedakah by the mekabel tzedakah? Rava mishum shalom malchus. Rava it accepted it al shalom malchus. He didn't want them to be upset. Ravami nami mishum shalom malchus. Doesn't Ravami also have the cheshbon that if they don't accept it tzedakah, they're going to be insulted? So Madi boyle mafaginu laniya of the kechavim. Ravami had a different cheshbon. He said, if the Gaisha king gives their tzedakah to the Yidden, the Goyim will be upset. They're going to say, look at all those parasitic Jews that they're taking our tax monies and they're using it up. Which you see, that libel is still existing now. Rava Nami was aware of this problem. He took the money that Shvar Malka gave for tzedakah and he distributed it to Goyim. So this, first of all, it addressed the problem that Rav Ami was concerned about Shalom Malchus, that people would be upset that their money was going to Yidden, and also addressed the first problem that it was giving schusim to the Gayish kings because the tzedakah was not actually going to Yidden. They weren't getting the schus of tzedakah. Rav Ami de Ikbid, who the Lasai Mekaimei. The only reason why Rav Ami was makar is because he never heard the end of the story. He wasn't aware that Rava actually gave it to Goyim as opposed to distributing it to Yidden. Tanya, Amar Lov al Binyamin HaTzadik. He said Binyamin HaTzadik Shahayamun al Kupa Shel Tzedakah. He was in charge of the Kupa Shel Tzedakah. A woman came to him in the times of famine. Amar Loi, Rebbe Parnaseni, she said, Rebbe, give me I need what to support myself. He swore that there's nothing in the Kupa Tzedakah. The cupboard is bare. She said to him, if you don't give me what to eat, I and my 7 children are all going to die of starvation. So he gave her from his own. After a while, this Binyamin HaTzadik, who had taken his own money to make up the deficit for the Kuba Shel Tzedakah, he got sick. But not almost, he was about to die. Amr Malach Yashar said, whoever saves one life is as if he saved an entire world. How could it be this Binyamin HaTzadik who saved 8 people that he should die early? Miyad Karla Gzardina. Immediately his Gzardin was ripped up. Tana, and he ended up living another 22 years. Trying to come up with a svara of why 22 years, and nothing occurred to me. Well, it was like 8 doesn't divide into 22. Tana Abban, Meiser Mumbas Hamelach, Shebizbiz Eitzroisav, Eitzroisav Voisav, B'Shnei B'Tzura. Mumbas Hamelach was a Jewish king, a tzaddik, that he emptied out his storehouses and the storehouses that had been built up by his forebears during the years of famine. And all of his relatives got angry at him. Our fathers saved up, and they kept on adding to what their fathers had saved up. And now you're giving it all out for tzedakah. They saved for this world, and I was going this for Shemayim. Shneimar emes me'eretz titzmach. Truth will sprout from the land. But tzedek mishamayim nishkaf, and tzedek comes from Shemayim. So what he went to say is that tzedek is its places in Shemayim. So by accumulating for myself tzedakah, by giving tzedakah, I'm getting something that's min Shemayim. My forefathers, by saving produce, by saving crops, they saved something that is vulnerable to the yad, that it could get lost. But I got something that's permanent. The tzedek and mishpat are in the Rebbeinu Shalom's place where the Rebbeinu Shalom sits, and that's obviously above any possible deterioration. They saved Paris in their storehouses, but it doesn't make any more Paris. They say about it. They say on the tzaddik that it's good. He eats because he eats the Paris of his produce. That means that the Paris of a tzaddik is the tzedakah that he does, and that tzedakah produces Paris for him. They saved money. I saved nefashos. The Paris of a tzaddik is life. And someone who acquires nefashos, meaning by helping people, he's a chacham that he's saving something that's I'm being saving nefashos. They saved their produce and they never used it. They saved it for their children and their children's children. Now I am getting the benefit of what I saved. The tzedakah benefits the one who gives the tzedakah. I was going to the that your tzedek will go in front of you, and kvayt Hashem yasafcha, the Rebbeinu Shalom will provide it for you in the olam haba achamisa. We said in the Mishnah that if someone, when is someone part of the city legabe being mechuyev to participate in the taxes and in the different stakas? So he said if he bought a house, if he bought a house in the city, then he becomes a member of the city immediately. So come on, the time of someone who buys any karka at all, the smallest karka, even not enough for a house, he's considered a part of the city that he has to participate in the tzedakah. Rishon Gamliel says it doesn't have to be. It's not enough that he gets any piece of karka. It has to be a size big enough to have a house in it, which is still not like our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says you actually have to have a house, but there's a steer of Rishon Gamliel. One place he says any amount, and now he's saying it has to be enough to build a house. Trei Tanoim Alib Rishon Gamliel. It's a machlekes Tanoim about what Rishon Gamliel said. So the Mishnah. There's no din chaluk on a chatzar, meaning we've talked about that. If you have two shutfin in a chatzar, one can say to the other, "I would like to split," but that's only, as the Mishnah says, if there's 4 amas. There's going to be 4 amas for each one after you split it. You can only force a chalukah if there's going to be enough left for each person to have a respectable amount. But if it's going to be less than 4 amas, you have to keep it together so it should be usable. The same thing, we're talking about a chutzner, a courtyard. But on a field, unless there's 9 kavim for each one and 9 kavim for each one of the 2 partners. Yudah says it's half as much. You only need 4.5 kavim for each one. The loyas hagina, so that was talking about a field that you produce grain. And you can't do a vegetable garden, which is much smaller than a field of grain. Actually, you have a chatzi kav lezeh, a chatzi kav lezeh. You only have to have, you could plant a half a kav on each plot that's left over after you split it. Rabbi Kiva says half as much, it has to be a quarter of a kav for each one. The leis atraklim, the leis amayrin, the different types of rooms in a palace. The leis ashevech, and not a chicken coop. Leis talis, and not a cloak. Leis merchatz, and not a bathhouse. Leis beis abad, and not a olive press, a room for olive press. Leis beis shlochen, and not a field, an irrigated field. Until each, after the separation, you can only force it to be separated if after separation there'll be sufficient for each one to have something sufficient. And what's the rule to say what's kedei lezeh? Kedei lezeh. Anything that if you'll separate and it's still going to be called a beis habad or a beis hashlochen, instead of being called an abandoned plot of land that's a useless plot of land, then each one could be forced to be chalak. This is all if they both don't agree. If it's less than that, they could be chalak even for less than that. Now the Gemara, obviously, this goes without saying. If you have 2 partners and they both agree they want to split, why would we say that they can't do so? This is all dinei mamnis. There's no isser involved. The reason is only for the next part. To contrast that, if it's kisvei kaidish, if it's a sefer, they have a chumash that two people own b'shutvas. You can't say I'll take bereshis and shemais and you'll get vayikra b'midbar dvarim. It's not bakavedik, and therefore they can't split it, even if they agree to do so. That which we said in the Mishnah, right? That they could each force the other one to split as long as it's arba amas al arba amas in a chutzner. That's excluding the makom for the psachim in the house, right? A chutzner is a courtyard that houses are open into it. So the people who have houses opening into the chutzner, they also have a certain amount of rights around the Pesach by the doorway inside the chutzner that they get, as we're going to see, dalet amas al dalet amas by their doorway. So when you split up the rest of the chutzner, it has to be dalet amas al dalet amas plus the dalet amas al dalet amas for anyone's doors. Tanya nami haki.
How do we get to Shmoyna? I'm not sure.
We didn't say anything. Didn't say anything about Shmoyna.
Okay.
We're gonna get to that soon.
Okay, sorry.
Tanya nami haki. Ein cholken es a chutzner achi yeba Shmoyna amas lazeh or Shmoyna amas lazeh. You can't divide up a chutzner. We're just starting the Gemara on the bottom of Yud Aleph, Amid Aleph. So we said the Mishnah said, you can only be chaylik a chatzar, you can divide up a chatzar if there's going to be daled al daled for each person. That's a usable amount of chatzar. Less than that is not usable. So Rav Asi said b'shem Rav Yochanan that in addition to the daled amas al daled amas that they're going to each be left of unused chatzar, there also has to be, that's excluding whatever amount is dedicated around the entranceway to the houses that open into the chutzner, because that belongs to the people who have doors going into the chutzner. Tanya nami hachi. Unless you have 8 amas for each one of them. We said in our Mishnah only 4. It must be like Rav Asi that in addition to the 4 amas that you have to divide, there's also normally every house in a chutzner also has a door going into the chutzner, so they also get their area, their threshold area around their door. So that's 4 by 4, and then another 4 by 4 to split. Shmamina. Some learned this as a kasha. The same din, they just said it in a different structure. He said you can have Oh, you can't be chalik chutz unless there's 4 amos each one. But Tanya shmoina amos l'zeh, shmoina amos l'zeh. I would say shmoina and shmoina. Rav Asi and Rav Yechon arba amos sha'amru chutz mishal psachim. That's the answer. The answer is like we said with Rav Asi.
So you understand this means that you have to have the Arba Amos outside of the Pesach and then an additional Arba Amos, meaning like does it have to fit that way, or 8 by 8, meaning like the area of what would have been. It's just a certain amount of
not 8 by 8, it's 8 by 4. Just as Arba Amos.
That's true.
Just as showing an Arba.
So saying does he have to actually have that to the 4 and then another Arba Amos, or the part is that the amount of space?
You mean does it have to be in that configuration?
Right.
You have to ask guy who do tchumen. Like this is, I don't know how you mean. Could it be like 3 by 6?
I'm saying in the Pasha and the Gemara, so Gemara saying that it's 4 that doesn't get counted, and then or saying that.
I mean, the question is like, well, what is a usable space? Is a 3 by 5 equally usable as 4 by 4? Even though 3 by 5 it's really a little more. 3.1 by 5 to equal 16 square. Is it? You're asking? Does it have to be 16 square amos, or does it have to be specifically?
Right.
A perimeter of 4 by 4.
That's like red.
Yeah, I don't know. Rav Huna. This is talking. Rashi says this is talking about a different din. Chotza mischalekes l'fi psacha. Rashi says this is talking about if you have 2 brothers who the father gave them each different houses in the same chotza, and so the one person got a house that had 2 doorways into the chotzer, and the other one got a house that had 1 doorway into the chotzer. So Rav Huda says, the brother who the father gave him the house with 2 doors, he gets 2/3 of the chatzar, and the other one gets 1/3 of the chatzar. Rav Chizda says no. The father gave him the house, and the house comes with its outside area, which is used for unpacking, like we can see on Amid Beis. It's used for unloading packages. And the rest of the chatzar is divided evenly between the 2 brothers, like any other Yerush. Tanya Kavasa de Rav Psachim shebechatzar yeshlan arba amos. The psachim and the chatzar are entitled to 4 amos. If there's two brothers, like we said, and one has 1 pasach, the other has 2 psachim, zeshiyeshla pesach echad noitel arba amos, zeshiyeshla psachim noitel shmoin amos. Bashar chalkum b'shava. So Itaka comes out like that pshat, like Rav Chizda. If one had a Pesach that was an extra wide door, like a garage door, so it's 8 amos wide. He takes 4 amos opposite the Pesach. And additionally, he gets 4 amos in the chatzar. What is this talking about that he gets 4 amos in the chatzar? Why should he get an extra 4 amos? What it means to say is, even though he has an extra wide door and he's getting 8 amos wide, it's still the same 4 amos. It doesn't get all of a sudden 8 amos by 8 amos. It's just saying that you have the same 4 amos depth into the chatzar. Amar Amen. Hi Pera decisively. They used to have like a collection thing, a hole that they would spit in it. They would put in it their pits to be used for the animals to eat. Someone has such a pit in the middle of the chatzar that belongs to him, he's entitled to Ara Amos all around it because his animals have to use it to eat by it. That's only if, as Rashi explains, this hole that he puts his pits in is not directly opposite a special door that he has to get to the hole. Then that's the area that he's designated for him to put his stuff in, and that's where he has to also pick his animals, and that's the only Dalet Amos that he gets. Amar Rav Huna, Achsadra ein la Dalet Amos. An Achsadra is like it's like a pagoda, like a roof with 4 pillars on the corners holding it up. So Achsadra, if you have an Achsadra, I think the way Rashi explains it is yesh le min pesach l'chatzar, and this is going from his house, from the door of his house into the chatzar. So the Chsadra does not get Ein Lo Dalet Amas. It doesn't get its own Dalet Amas. Time and Mai, Bishum Pirik Masay. The reason why you get Dalet Amas is because people use it to load and unload their animals. That Dalet Amas outside the door. Over here, he could bring his animal underneath the pagoda and unload him there. Rashi explains the reason why normally you don't bring your animal into the house, and this will be relevant also later on. We'll see more specifically in the Gemara that a person is scared. Right? And Rashi says this directly. A person is scared to bring an animal into his house because it's going to break his kalim. So when you have an outdoor pagoda that's exposed to the elements, people won't keep their furniture there, they won't keep their kalim there, so they're not afraid to bring an animal in. So there's no reason to give Dalet Hamas outside of it. Motzei Rav Sheshes, Echad Sha'ari bottom, whether you have the doors to a house, or Echad Sha'ari Achsadros, or whether the entrance to an Achsadra, Yeshlan Dalet Hamas, you get Dalet Hamas outside of it. This is shver. We just said an Achsadra doesn't get Dalet Hamas because you could bring the animal inside. So we're talking about an Achsadra that's used for learning. Like, if you ever went to a summer camp, so they have, what were they called again? Those things that we used to learn in. Gazebos, right. They'd have a gazebo. And everyone would sit in a gazebo, but they used to have windows, and it was like a full wall around it. It was like a pagoda, but it was fully enclosed. And this is used for learning also. So the Gemara says, what's the shaila? Obviously, if you have walls and windows, it's fully enclosed. So there's no reason why people wouldn't have furniture in there. So they couldn't bring the animals in. So you obviously have to have Dalet Hamas. So it's a full-fledged dira. We're talking about a Roman pagoda, which has a very low wall around it. So there might be reason to think that people would not bring their kalim in there, and therefore they
would bring the animal in.
They would bring the animal in. So that's why you have to. We're telling you that no, the end there's no furniture, and therefore you need Dalet Hamas outside. Tanaraban Beis Shar Achsadra or Mirpeses. We had a Beis Shar before. We were talking about a Beis Shar as a gatehouse or like a privacy fence, like we have outside of our swimming pools. You can't see into the pool. So this is a Beis Shar we talked about for Chatzah. This is a Beis Shar that people have around their houses in the Chatzah. And an Achsadra, that we just discussed, a pagoda at the entrance of the house, Mirpeses. Mirpeses, we've had, I don't remember where, but we've had it described before. It's like the second floor of a motel. If you ever saw those long motels, you have a long hallway on the outside of the rooms, and then there's a single staircase coming down. There's only one entrance to this Mirpeses. So all these things, Yeshlan Dalet Hamas. The Beis Shar has a Dalet Hamas outside of it, and the Achsadra, like we just discussed, the Mirpeses. This Mirpeses at the end of the staircase, this has Dalet Hamas. So the Achsadra over here, obviously we're talking about the Achsadra Remaisa, the kind of Achsadra that has walls. If there were, like we said, this similar to a motel situation, the second floor, there were 5 houses or rooms that opened up into the Mirpeses. They only have the Dalet Hamas on the outside of their common entrance. A chicken coop. I had said before, I translated it as a chicken coop, but it's really a shayvach. It means a general coop for other birds. But a chicken coop that a person uses to domesticate chickens in, so he's constantly going in and bring the chickens in and out. You get an extra Dalet Hamas to load and unload the chickens. The whole reason why you need Dalet Hamas is that you could unload your burden and bring it in. You just bring your chickens right up to the edge, and they flutter right over the wall into the lul. So there's no need for an extra Dalet Hamas. If you have a room that's half roofed and half with no roof, and then there's a door going out into the chutz. You get an additional Dalet Hamas. He doesn't get an extra Dalet Hamas. Not only if the entrance is on the unroofed part, where the kiruyim is lagav, the roofed part is on toward the inside, away from where the entrance is. After the ayah lagavoyim mifra, that he could bring his animal inside in the unroofed part where there's no furniture and unload him there. Even if the wall part is on the outside, after the ayah lagavoyim mifra, he could still walk through the parts with the kalim, bring it to the parts that doesn't have kalim because there's no roof, and that's where he'll take it apart because the kalim it's a problem that you can't unload the animal, but you can walk the animal through the part with kalim. Someone has a house that the front of his house is opened into a chutzner, and the back of his house is opened into a mavi. A mavi is an alley that goes into the shusarabim. A chutzner is an area that goes into a mavi. But he happened to have the back of his house is opening into an alley that opens to the shusarabim. B'nei mavi ma'akon alav, or ein ma'akon alav. And what he wanted to do is he wanted to open up a door into this mavi. We say the b'nei mavi can stop him, because by opening up, the way Rashi understands it is that by opening up into the people in the mavi, they don't want the additional traffic that this guy is going to now be walking through their mavi. Achsanya, when it comes to quartering troops, I don't know if everyone knows, but we just passed July 4th. One of the elements of the Constitution is that you can't be forced to quarter soldiers. But back in the day, before the Declaration of Independence, in our Constitution used to force people to take soldiers into the houses. They would have to divide them up amongst the people in the town. So when you're dividing up how many people are relegated to a specific household, achsanya, that quartering soldiers, lefi bnei adam is chalkas, lefi psachim is chalkas. Does it go according to how many families there are in this apartment? Lefi psachim, does it go according to how many entrances? Amalei lefi bnei adam is chalkas. It goes according to the people. Tanya nami hachi zevel shebechatzer v'chalkas lefi psachim. They used to collect refuse, animal refuse, in the chatzar, and it had value because eventually it would get mixed with dirt and it would become fertilizer. So your entitlement to the fertilizer that's produced by living in your chatzar, it's mischalik lefi the psachim, because that's each Pesach has a certain amount of zevel that goes out of it. Achsanya lefi bnei adam, and achsanya goes according to the amount of people, just like we said before. Amar Rav Huna. Someone who's part of a mavi, and when you have a mavi, when you have an entrance into the mavi, this guy he's entitled to dalat amas in front of his entrance into the mavi. He wants to close off his dalat amas. He's allowed to use it. I assume we're talking about he's allowed to load and unload in there, but he wants to now make it into a private space. He wants to put a mechitza around his dalat amas or dalat amas. Bnei mavi ma'akvan alav. Bnei mavi can stop him. Shemar b'alein esaderech. If you're going to have a bunch of little booths in the middle of your mavi, obviously it's going to take longer. You're going to have to walk around the booth to get from one end of the mavi to the other. Meisvei, and that sounds like any ben mavi can say, I don't allow this. Meisvei chamesh chatzer psucha l'mavi. If you have 5 chatzeros open into a single mavi, they're all entered in a long line, and the mavi is open on one end and closed at the other end. So kula mishtamshus and machitzana, the one that's closest, the outside, the closest to the Rishus HaRabim, which is the entrance to the mavi. If the chitzana wants to do anything in his part, everyone's allowed to use his section because they have to go through his section to get to the Rishus HaRabim. The chitzana only has rights in his own section. He has no right to go into the rest of the mavi that he doesn't have any interest in, because there's no Rishus HaRabim in that direction. And whoever's left after the first one, they could all use from the second one, the second from the Rishus HaRabim. He could use his own, and plus the one that's in between him and the Rishus HaRabim. Nimtzis Pnimis, the one that's the furthest from the Rishus HaRabim, the innermost chatzar, Mishtamshus la'atzma, Mishtamish for itself, and Mishtamshus and kolachas v'yachas. He has exclusive rights to his section, and he's Mishtamish in everyone else. But in any case, the mashmayis from this is that you're only allowed to have a say in the parts of the chutzah that you use. So why did we say before that any member of any participant in the mavi can stop someone who wants to build a booth around his entrance? It should only be the ones who have a right to walk through a section. And as we're saying, you only have a right to walk through a section of a mavi if it's in between where you are and the entrance to Shurab. If you're deeper in, if you're further out from where this entrance is, you have no say in it. You only have rights for things that are between you and the Shurab. So the Tanya, this is the same thing we said before, that you can't open up and make more traffic in the mavi. If there was an entrance out, it was already there, and now he wants to open it up, in that case, if that Pesach had previously been there and was just closed up, if he wants to reopen a previously closed, he could do so. Divrei Rabbi, Chamash Chatzeres Hapsuchos Lamavi, Kulan Mishtamshus B'Mavi Zu, Imzu. Rishon Elazar says if you have 5 Chatzeres that are pasuk into the same mavi, the same thing that we said, all of them could all be mishtamish in the mavi together. So Chatzeres Mandekar Shmai. First we said the din of bnei mavi ma'akvan alav. If someone wants to, if it was hayisasam b'bishon lepashchay, and now we're saying that's divrei Rabbi. Now we're saying Shimon Lazar is talking about a whole different din of we have 5 Chatzeres that everyone could be mishtamshus in the mavi. So what surah is talking about? Surah Mefsa. So we're missing obviously a major part of the machlokes. B'chein chamish Chatzeres hapsuchos lamavi kulam mishtamshus b'chitzayna. Like we just said before, that everyone is only entitled to the areas that are in between his entrance and the Shurab. Divrei Rabbi, that's Rabbi Shik. Rishon Gamliel is coming to argue that Rishon Elazar, anyone who has an entrance into a mavi and the mavi goes to the Shurab, even if he's on the outside, he has a say on the entire mavi because the whole mavi is a rishus for all those people. Okay, we'll stop over here. Have a good tvach, and Bez Shem tomorrow.